welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about sexual fetishes and fantasies and at what price a person has to pay to get those fantasies or fetishes fulfilled, and is it worth it? So we're going to break this apart, and this is something that I will do with clients as well, is we will talk about how strong a fetish or a fantasy is and what parts of your life are you basically having to give up in order to get your fantasy satisfied or your fetish satisfied, and is it worth it? Because if you have a strong desire for a particular fetish or a fantasy, and it's something that you feel moves you or even takes over your life, what cost does it have on your health, your relationship, and how you conduct yourself? And is it something that is manageable? And if you actually make a graph of the benefits, do they outweigh the negative aspects? And one of the problems that people have with trying to manage a fetish or a fantasy is if they don't get the need fulfilled, what's going to replace it? What's going to motivate them to actually stop doing some of the behavior when there's nothing else to fill it with? And some of the fantasies and behaviors, and I guess the rewards that come with it, also have a dopamine reaction where it makes a person feel good temporarily, and that could be, I don't want to say addicting, but that could be quite a pleasant feeling. It could also be used as a way of distraction. Some people use it because they're bored. They use it because they feel lonely. They use it because it is so arousing. They use it because they think that they can and it's not going to have severe consequences. Perhaps a person is engaging in some sexual activity that if they got caught, it could cost them their freedom or cost them their relationship. But they've gotten to a point where they haven't been caught and they're just so used to doing it, and so there really isn't any punishment for it. And we can think of that in terms of, how big is the cost of this particular desire that you're trying to fulfill. And if you break it down into that simple category, it takes out this idea that you don't have control over it. And that's one of the things that I want to make very clear, is that everybody has a choice. So if you choose to fulfill a fantasy or a fetish, you are choosing it at the risk of something else for the most part, unless you're in a situation where your partner or the person that you're fulfilling your fantasy with is in agreement and enjoys it, and then there really isn't a cost to it. There isn't a cost to what you're doing because you're not hurting yourself or the other person, you're not hurting your relationship, and therefore it's not a problem for you. And that's really not who my audience is. The people that come to see me, it's because their fetish or their fantasy is something that they feel is hurting their life, or it's causing a problem in their relationship, or they're not sure how to manage it. They maybe even want to get rid of it, but they don't know how. And so this is where we take the logical approach to it. And what are ways that a person can manage their fetish, have less expectations around their fetish, and kind of dismantle why they even have it. The basic understanding of why you're even attracted to what you're attracted to, and how that is controlling certain aspects of your life or your thoughts. Sometimes people think about these things on a regular basis, which adds energy to it, which makes it bigger. or they watch pornography, or they read about it or write about it, or they interact with people on chats or in person or escorts or whatever. I mean, there's all different ways to fulfill a fantasy nowadays. But are you really benefiting from that in a healthy way? And if the answer is no, then you need to start changing your idea of what it's worth to you. So let's say that you have a fantasy and you're focusing on it so much that you're not working as much, or it's affecting your relationship. Then we would say that the cost of it outweighs the benefits. So how do you change that? Well, you first have to understand that the cost of it is outweighing the benefit, and take responsibility and say, okay, I have a problem that I need to start dealing with, or it will eventually destroy my life. Now, the easy thing for me to say is obviously to go out and find someone to help you do that, but not everybody has the financial means to do that, or they may not be ready to talk to someone. So what I recommend is, if you're in that situation, and that's why I do these videos, to try to help the people that I don't personally help to get out to a bigger audience, is to really sit down and make a simple chart. I mean, that's a great start. Is, okay, I have this fantasy or fetish. This is the benefits of it, and this is the cost of it. So in order for me to get pleasure in category A, I have to do all these things in category B. Now, how can I start making them at least more equal? So let's say that I want to fulfill my fantasy or fetish once a day, but it's costing me this much to do it. So now I have to say, okay, I can maybe, do it every other day. And so it's not costing me that much financially over on this side. And it's a slow process. No one's just going to jump into changing. It takes a while to do it. But the other aspect of it, what are you going to fill in the days that you're not concentrating on that fantasy or that fetish? What are you going to do that's productive in your life that you can add into a column C? So in a column C, maybe you start thinking of things. Well, I can exercise, or I can read a book, or I can find a new project, or I can listen to some self-help videos, or I can, concentrate on something else. So you have to have something in category C that you can actually move to, that you do, that is fulfilling and makes you feel good. Otherwise, there's nothing to motivate you to try to change. There's also, people find going to talks, listening to religious sermons. People have found that going to, like I said, exercise, or a weightlifting class, or yoga, or hiking, or getting involved with a group. There has to be something on category C that you can start bringing into your life. And so that's the first way of getting started. Is it really is about behavior. So you're slowly changing your behavior, but you're also recognizing that your behavior is not healthy. And so if you're having this sexual fetish or fantasy that is not healthy, you have to recognize it. You have to be honest with yourself and say, hey, this isn't something that's good for me. I need to slowly change it, but I can't have expectations that it's going to change overnight. And also, there's a little bit of the unknown, like what are you going to replace it with that also makes you feel good? And so by at least starting these steps, this is one way to get started. And let's say that you're constantly watching porn. The times that you don't watch it, and the more you start replacing it with other things, the less that you're going to want to watch it, because you're also not denying it from yourself. That's where people go wrong with this. They'll just say, cold turkey, I'm going to deny myself, that's it. And then they don't have anything to replace it with. They don't have anything to look forward. So when you do watch your porn, or you do engage in your fetish or your fantasy, that also has to be a reward. You're doing all of these other things first. You're making sure that you're exercising, you're eating right, you're taking responsibility for your relationship, whatever is going on, and then you're indulging in your fantasy is going to be more of your reward rather than your expectation, or rather that you're feeling depressed or down and this is going to be your go-to thing. Okay, so it's kind of like you have to change that in your mind, and that's where going to category C, start replacing it with the other aspects of your life. You'll notice that your life is more fulfilling. Another thing that you can do is you can make a schedule for yourself. It's really important to write down a daily schedule. What are you going to do? How are you going to manage your time? And then you can say, okay, well, I'm used to indulging in my fantasy at this time every day. Well, okay, I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to, chart out an hour for myself the day after, and I'm going to wait, and then I'm going to do it then. And so once you've done that for a couple months, then you go to the next step, which is a little bit less time indulging in that fantasy, a little more time on area C, bringing in something else into your life, and then slowly taking yourself out of that fantasy or fetish. That's if it's a problem in your life. That's the way that you start decreasing it. You start adding things into your life, and you slowly walk away from it. Now, the other part that gets people in trouble is you'll have a side of you that says, oh, why can't I just do this? Or I should just do it. And it's that part that's just saying, go ahead and just engage in it. Well, that's when you have to look at the negative aspect of your chart and go, okay, if I'm just engaging in these bad behaviors or stuff that's costing me problems, this is the negative side of it. I have to really go back and focus and say, I'm not going to sacrifice that. The cost is too high. I have to replace it over here in category C, and then I have to manage my fetishes, my desires and all this in category A, and try to get a handle on it, be responsible, and set up a time, a calendar, a chart, and so on and so forth. So it's something that I just wanted to address with you today. It's something that you can start. You can come back to this video time and time again if you need that to be something that kind of gets you through the day, to give you a start. And then also being aware that if you are making progress in your life, to give yourself a pat on the back, to say, I'm accomplishing this, I've kind of changed this behavior, I feel better about myself, I want to, give myself a pat on the back and say, good job, and don't put yourself down. Because that's one of the things that'll lead you right back to the behavior, is if you're beating yourself up about it and putting yourself down. And when you're having your fantasy, your sexual behavior, and it's kind of your reward for not doing it as much, the other aspect is not to shame yourself, not to say that you're weak, or not to say that you're this or you're that, because you're indulging in it. Obviously, I'm not talking about anything that's hurting yourself or anyone else. That is a whole different category. But, so if you're doing it and you're not doing it as often, then I also want you to be aware that that you shouldn't beat yourself up as much, because then you'll just go back into the bad behavior. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so if you have any comments, leave them below. This is kind of a little bit of a confusing topic, but if you follow along these lines, it can really help you with your life. Obviously, if you can get counseling, it's very helpful, because then you have someone who is not only counseling but coaching you to change the behavior a little bit, and you do have control of your behavior. So this is not something that you don't have control of, and that's the one thing that keeps people stuck in their behavior, is they say, oh, well, I don't have control over it. And That's just a fallacy. You do. You make choices in your life. Every minute of the day, you make a choice to think something, to do something, to say something, to take responsibility for something. We're constantly making choices. All right, so please leave your comment, give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and subscribe to my channel. As you know, I believe everyone deserves to have a healthy sex life, and so do you.